it does get down to room acoustics. It does get down to 1 watt, 1 dB. I mean, you don't need these things if you know certain things. See, we got the dogs crazy.
Do you sometimes look back and go and think of what you were involved with and what you sort of invented, like base reinforcements and
some
arrays? I mean,
some of it is, some of it was,
that was revolutionary.
Yeah, but at the same time, it does get down to room acoustics. It does get down to 1 watt, 1 dB. I mean, you don't need these things if you know certain things. Certain things weren't necessarily made. I can't say the technology wasn't there, but some things, you were looking for something. That's how it happened. Necessity is the mother of invention. There was a necessity. And it'd be either standing in the woods listening to the birds singing or being home with headphones on. You wanted that sound from, that third-ear sound. You wanted it the way you wanted that picture, okay? There's a stereo image. There's actually a picture that presents itself. It's not. One way to check your sound, if it's correct, is you can see what's happening. You can see that the pianist is over there and they're by the microphone and they're moving their head. You can actually see that. You can see the bass fill. You can see where they're standing, okay? So there's a stereo image, okay? Yeah, it was interesting how it happened because I knew absolutely nothing about it. It was just a feeling. I learned a little bit of this from one person, a little bit from that, experiences this and so on and so forth. Ultimately, it came, interestingly enough, it came pretty much back to the same thing where I started from, which I find very interesting, only with a few knowledgeable things that I didn't know. How serious room acoustics were, the recording itself. I went to a friend's house one day. He had 2 AR speakers and a tape recorder. I can't remember, for some reason I can't remember the tape recorder. It was a pretty popular one. It was a decent tape recorder. And this person had no vinyl in their house. They had second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth generations off the master tape. Master tape is this thick, okay? Well, they had the 1/4-inch tape. So it was greatly reduced, and even from the quality of the studio tape, okay? However, it was still better than what it would be when you go through the process of coming out on vinyl. Okay, by the time you go through all that stuff, because there's more stuff added, you go from the tape to this. I sat there and I listened to 2 AR bookshelf speakers and 1 tape recorder to some music that blew my mind. That was one experience I had in my life. I said, I can't believe how this sounds. Only because the source was closer to this source. So that brings you back to, anything that you're doing with audio must be as pure as possible. It really should be Class A. In the long term, you'll save a lot of money and a lot of looking around and this and that. It must be a very efficient system. And if the sound is correct going in, believe me, you'll have everything you need. If the speaker reaches all the frequencies efficiently, if there's 1 watt, 1 dB, and the speaker has a tweeter, mid-range, and bass, you will get the whole spectrum. You won't need the so-called bass reinforcement. Not to promote any sound system, but Eclipse Shorten does, and that's why I use them, you put them on 1 watt, you do get 1 dB back. and it will reproduce a low C note, an organ, low C note, unobtrusively. Not too many speakers will do that. It's not just it's not just the speaker. It's also the sound source going in it. But if everything's correct, a Klipschorn will do that, which is the Klipschorn and fold horn in the corner, which the room becomes part of the speaker. That's where your reinforcement comes in. So, what I was looking for, I didn't have the audio equipment at the time to get to that, so that was part of it. But now that I know what I know now, if I can get a low C note of a folded horn in the corner, I don't need to add bass reinforcement. I don't need to do that. It's all there.
So there's no need for bass horns, and
there's no need for the so-called additional sub-bass horns, because you can get, see, sub-bass means exactly that. Sub-bass, how low will it go? So you sort of create this cabinet with these speakers in there to create this effect, okay? And you know, it's one way of doing it, but it's not ultimately the best way to do it. You need a good speaker. You need a good sound source. You need it must be efficient. If you got 1 watt, 1 dB, and the source of the sound is clean, and you're playing something that hits a low C note, it will do it. It will do it. You don't need all this other stuff. It's there already.
Starting as far back as 1968, these turntables are called the Thorens. The first turntable here on my left is the Thorens Td 125. This is my favorite turntable, and there's a few reasons why that it is my favorite turntable. One of them is because you can change the tone arm to any tone arm that you like. I happen to admire this tone arm. This is the Grace G747 Gyromaster carbon fiber tone arm. It's beautiful, it's thin, it's light, and it has a beautiful art statement to it. And that's another thing about the Thorens turntables. They're not just turntables, they're an art statement. They're just beautiful to look at, as well as their great performance. This turntable came out in 1968 and ended in 1972. The next turntable is the Thorens Td 125 Mk2, which is pretty much the same turntable as the 125, except that this came with a tone on left. This turntable was used by David Mancuso at the Prince Street location before he got his custom turntables, when he used to have the booth upstairs in the balcony. It also has been used by Nicky Ciano at the gallery, and it has been used by Larry Levan at the garage. For the full term that the garage was open, this was the turntable that Larry played on. The next turntable is the Thorens Td Mk2 126 electronic. It first came out in 1976 to 1978, and then they came out with the Mk3, which started in 1978 to 1981. And that pretty much ended the traditional look of the Thorens that started from the 125 all the way up to this turntable here. The turntables that have, in my opinion, the best tracking ability, that lock on and stay locked on when you beat mixing, I would recommend first choice the 125 and then the 125 Mk2. The 126 electronic takes a lot of work to keep it on beat. You have to constantly ride the pitch control, from my experience.
Welcome everyone to the wonderful world of audio. And we have here a state-of-the-art Class A turntable. The foundation of the turntable is made by Mitch Cottier. turntable itself, which is really the turntable, is the part that turns and really has one primary function, and that is to turn at the correct speed at all times. Here is the tone arm, which is also made by someone else. That is by Fidelity Research. And this is a direct drive techniques. And here we have sleeping, but we're going to wake them up, is a Koetsu cartridge. I met the gentleman who made these. He's 99 years old. He lives in Japan. And this is in onyx. And it's handmade and everything, not by machine. See? And if you took the thicknesses of 2 sheets of paper, that would be the distance from here to the record, which is maintained at all times, even if the record's going, the needle's going like this. So we will insert the cartridge, which is a moving coil cartridge. With these cartridges, you have to be very straightforward. You cannot use them in any other way except going with the record. This is to stabilize the record and to prevent any airborne acoustical feedback. Actually, I should put on a record, and this goes over the record like that, and very gently and very carefully. Keeping your sleeves up is good because you might catch the needle, and so forth. And I don't know if you can see the distance, how close that is to the record. Let me just move this over. Okay. Okay, now if theoretically, if you turn this turntable upside down, the arm would still go to the record because it's dynamically balanced. And also, if you took this turntable while a record was playing, actually playing, and stuck it into a subwoofer speaker inside the frame itself while the speaker was on, and turn the volume up, you would not get any feedback. The whole idea is to have the system technically correct, but musical. If you look at this turntable as a cutting board, or when they cut records, this is actually a mirror reflection of the same instrument, only it plays back instead of cutting a record. Also, this is a 16-inch arm which plays a 16-inch record, which is the way they originally made them when they first pressed them up. So there's no voodoo in this or anything like that. This is strictly fundamentals and physics. This is the correct way to do it. When you get into Class A, it doesn't really matter which turntable you use. You might choose one from another because of the price or the name or whatever. But basically, when you enter state-of-the-art Class A, it's all basically the same. It's correct, and it will last you forever. No, it's no program.
So it wasn't, it was random.
It was, I would say, in the best way I like to relate to it is in the Far East and a lot of kind of ancient, whether it be Buddhist or Far Eastern religions, not so much organized, but, you know, it was done in bardos. First, the beginning, the middle, and then the reentry. So I kind of broke it up, maybe like, not broke it up, but kind of went into like in Trinity, You know, it's it's like an airplane. Take off. That's the first Bartle. Excuse me. And then you go a while. That's the second Bartle, and then your reentry. That's basically how things kind of work. A tripod is your strongest. But so basically that's the way it went. It was sort of the beginning was the very serene, sort of like as people came in and this and that. And because sometimes the nice people come a little later and this and that. Not that you were waiting, you just went with the flow. Got to go with the flow. Then it would go into that second gear. It was like now it's time to go into, and that would be that. And then reentry, which is the most important part. Reentry is the most important part because now it's time to make that ultimate change where you have to go back out there. You've gained this energy, this feeling, this, that, whatever the case might be. Maybe coming as a lion, but you still want to leave as a lamb. You don't want to. Plane's got to land. But I think you're probably more conscious about the plane landing than you are taking off. Taking off is sort of like a little more fun. But the landing part, you're like, sort of, okay. And that first wheel, reentry is a very important key because you have to make that transition. And if it's not done correctly, the whole thing collapses. Extreme example. I'll go to a place, and what would happen? The music be going, da 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 da. Suddenly it went off, the neon lights came on. Okay, time to leave. That's the worst scenario. That's the worst scenario of a reentry. That's like, boom. That's how you really blow people's head. It's sort of like that whole reentry is very, land back on your feet is very, very important, or else you blow the whole thing. So the beginning and the middle is not as important as the, that last note. Because that note, will carry you through somehow. It's very important.
Should it be a totally uplifting song, which I'm sure
should be whatever presents itself, because by then it's all presenting itself.
The clips were basically a corner speaker, and what it did is fed off the walls, so you get more of a fuller sound. But it wouldn't be as tight. You wouldn't get like a punching tight bass and ear-shattering tweeter. I mean, David did use tweeters, but it was like Richard took all of what was there and analyzed it and fine-honed it down to the precise mathematical equation of what sound is supposed to be. Everybody else was close, but nobody was as close as Richard.
Not even Mk2?
No. No.
Why do you say that? I mean, because I never went to the Loft, so I can't. But from what a lot of people say, they say that the Loft, when it came to sound, nothing came close to the Loft.
Well,
but
see,
the garage. Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, each room, every different room has different acoustical personalities. So you could take the same exact sound system and put them in 5 different rooms, and it will sound different in each room. Not much, but it would vary. Now, as far as the Loft, David had sought out Richard's advice and the application of the sound that he had into his space, and he fed off of Richard's intellect to get what he needed to know, and then he sort of did his own thing, and then he had Alex service the equipment, and it was a good sound system. But as I say, Richard was involved with David's Mk2 sound system, not as much, but as a advisor. He advised David on a lot of the things that he did and took under his wing. And Alex was the company that serviced the equipment.
What else came out of the loft in terms of sound?
Well, I think just the tweeter arrays is what I remember most. Bass horns also, but I think other people were using bass augmentation in clubs. I think that wasn't a unique idea. People were doing it elsewhere at the same time that David was doing it. We used a Klipschorn in David's place, which had a separate bass speaker. And today, not that many people use bass horns. They use regular bass speakers, either infinite baffle or bass reflex design. I still think bass horns is the answer because for the power that you've got available, you can play the bass much louder than you would any other way. Originally, that sound system was my design. It was for Mike Brody, who was the owner. We had done a club for him before that. It was called Reed Street. It was a former meatpacking place. And we did the design for the garage. And then somehow he fell in with Richard, and Richard took over and did a very, very big club. I mean, it was beautiful, very loud.